Our guest today, Peter Vesterbacka, is, according to Forbes, one of the most recognized people in Northern Europe. Formerly the mighty eagle at Rovio, he and his red hoodie were responsible for making the Angry Birds a global household name. And now, together with his partner, Gustav Valtonen, he is very active in the Finn-S-Bay Tunnel and City Development Project, one of the most ambitious construction projects in Europe. But before all of that, he was very busy helping Finland create a very thriving startup ecosystem, and particularly being the co-founder of Slush and co-founder of Mobile Monday. So it's a very big privilege for us to open the MySoCalledStartup.Life podcast series with such a wonderful personality. Welcome, Peter.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, so everyone knows that you're like co-founder of Slush, but I'd like you to go back like 20 years and talk a bit about the HP Mobile e-Services Bazaar that you started.
Yeah, so going back 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah. So that's like 1999. And so it's 20 years this October, and that's when we announced kind of like this HP Mobile, or actually long version HP Mobile e-Service Bazaar, but I mean just the HP Bazaar is how I kind of like refer to it. The background to that was that I worked for HP many years, and kind of like first in Finland, then couldn't like keep my mouth shut, so I ended up doing Europe, and then got like a global role. And then we started talking about, okay, where will the world go like now with this internet and beyond? And then we came up with this idea that it's all going to become a service. And then being from Finland, I said that actually everything will become a service, but I think that it's gonna happen first in mobile. And then I was told that, what do you mean, Peter? That I mean, like you guys in Finland, you might need mobile phones, but here in the US, there's plenty of pay phones all over the place, so we don't really need those mobile phones. So that's like a Finnish or like European thing. And but anyway, then we agreed that okay, let's do this mobile like e-services thing, and let's create this bazaar. What was very important, and there's like several lessons if you look at like this bazaar thing, that first of all, HP was what kind of like happens for your like typical corporation, that you tend to miss these things. So HP was missing out on this little thing called internet, and okay, many years later, our friends at Nokia, touch phones, and touch screens happened, and then like bad things happened to them. So I think that it's a good reminder that no matter how well you're doing, you should kind of like stay awake and realize that probably the most dangerous thing for like any corporation, any company, is being successful, because then you think that you figured it out, and then competition hits you and kills you. This
that relates to you. You're always, it's one thing I pick up. You're often saying it's always a good start.
Yeah,
and I learned that doesn't matter how big or how successful you've been, if you don't have that mentality, you will start to go down. Yeah,
I think that you always have to look at it that way, and also that I mean, if you don't eat your own lunch, somebody else will. And I think that this is also like when it comes to competition and all of that you really should think about no matter how successful that. It's a new game tomorrow, so you need to earn your place like every day. And once you start thinking that you figured it out, then you can be certain that you haven't, and before you know it, your business is like gone. But I think that what was great about this like HP experience in that and the bazaar, and I mean I could talk for hours about many other things, but it was very interesting that we actually then. Created this kind of like new entity, and it was like a physical space, so it was like a co-working space before co-working, and we also did these kind of like bazaar camps, so you could say hackathons before hackathons became a thing, and we did many things. We talked about ecosystems before pretty much like anybody else, so a lot of firsts that came out of this bazaar activity. But I think maybe the most important thing is that everybody else was doing competence centers, excellence centers, all kinds of like super boring corporate like centers. And we decided that, okay, let everybody else do their like wireless centers and excellence centers and whatever, and we'll do something different. And that's why we decided to call our like little team and entity the HP Bazaar. And of course, what happened was that all of those other like super boring corporate like things, came and went. So they kind of like did that for a while, and then they died. But we did this HP Bazaar program for several years. And again, people always then ask me that, oh, Peter, so like, what is this like HP Bazaar thing? Is it like a partner program? Is it like a developer program, marketing program? Like, what is it? And I said that it's actually all of that and more, and that's why we decided to call it a bazaar. So again, of course, love doing these kind of like things differently, but I love branding and building community and building branded community. So you could say that the HP Bazaar was a branded community. It was created to make it very easy for these up and coming startups, creating all these cool new services to work with HP. So you could say that the HP role was to provide the kind of like the facilities, and we're supplying the boring infrastructure to run the cool new services on.
I think in relation to this HP Bazaar, I was joking at an event not long ago about when you look at kind of any significant startup movement in Finland, and you turn over a stone, you find a Peter that got some laughs. But I think that there's some truth in that, because I remember you saying once that through the HP activity, you even wrote the first check for like the Aula community.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I did that with Jyri and Marko Ahtisaari. So we had a lot of discussions. So I did that.
How did it go from that kind of activity to Mobile Monday?
Yeah, but Mobile Monday then, we started Bazaar in 1999, and then 2000, then together with Vesku partners, we started the Mobile Monday movement. And what's very important there is that Mobile Monday we created because we needed to get this meeting place and this kind of like platform for all these up and coming like new companies. So it was very easy, but it's always a bit easier for the big corporations like the HPs and the Nokias and all these guys to get their voice heard. So we wanted to create an environment where these kind of like up and coming companies, making all kinds of like mobile marketing solutions, ringtone solutions, even games, and all of that they could get their like voices heard. And then so I had the idea for quite a while, and then it was actually at the housewarming party of Add to Phone, so one of the startups at the time. So then I was talking to Vesku and said that I actually have this idea for this like Mobile Monday community, and that we would have like this meeting every month, first Monday of the month. And then Vesku actually pulled it together, and we had the first Mobile Monday at Molly Malone's. And it was very simple format, like you show up, and then we had like 7 minutes, so you could pitch your like idea, and then we had like a beer, and then continued discussion over beer, and very informal. And then we also and we were running that for like several years, and then I kept pushing that we really want to take this to the world. So then in 2002 or 3, I think it was, I went to Tokyo together with a HP colleague, Nina Nordlund, so she speaks a bit of Japanese. So we went there, we actually rented a place called the Pink Cow, and we organized the first Mobile Monday Tokyo together with Lars Koshishi, so he still like lives there. And then we got feedback that, hey, this was the best event in Japan, that you nicely brought together like the expats and the locals, and like fantastic. And then what happened was, and this was again I think 2003 or 2, but anyway, then Nikkei Business did a video interview, and it was like pre-YouTube and pre-internet video being everywhere, but they took a video interviewing us about Mobile Monday. And then 2 guys in Silicon Valley, Mike and Russ, they had been organizing this Bay Area Mobility Association, and trying to get Americans and Silicon Valley excited about mobile, and very not successful. So very few people showed up. But then they saw this video about Mobile Monday Tokyo, And then Mike, wrote a blog post that, we're now organizing Mobile Monday Silicon Valley. And every, first Monday of the month, and they started doing that, and it took off. And it became like a thing in Silicon Valley. And actually, Mobile Monday Silicon Valley is one of the few chapters that is still, the few cells of Mobile Monday that's still around, and they organize events now and then, just like Tokyo, by the way. And then what happened was that then a lot of people saw the blog post by Mike, and then Mobile Monday started happening here and there because people thought that this is some kind of Silicon Valley thing, we should have one as well. And what was interesting is that I told my team then at HP, showed them the blog post and explained that this is exactly what I had in mind, that we have this Fight Club strategy for Mobile Monday. So we create a very simple format, and then just like in the Fight Club movie, these cells start popping up without the key guys even knowing about it. So I had never met with Mike, I had never met with Russ, and they started Mobile Monday like Silicon Valley without ever having talked about it with us. So it was such a powerful brand, such a powerful format that it just happened. And then it went to London, Amsterdam, Milan, San Francisco, so Silicon Valley one, LA, San Diego, Seattle, New York, Washington DC, Singapore, Beijing, Shanghai. Then the CTO of Nokia, American CTO at the time, he actually started using Mobile Monday as an example of how things are done in Silicon Valley. So he thought that Silicon Valley had invented Mobile Monday, and I always, enjoyed that this is how it goes, that in Finland we're not always like the best marketeers on the planet, so I don't mind, other people taking credit for that. But it was actually it worked exactly as I thought with this Fight Club strategy, that, it just happens.
I think that openness was super important. I remember feeling that such a powerful need to go to one of the Mobile Mondays in Molly Malone. I was taking my 3-year-old kid with me at the time because exactly. I couldn't find a babysitter. That's how big the draw was.
Totally.
I don't know if that came. There was the open coffee meetups, but I think
yes.
Mobile Mondays were going before even.
Many years before.
So they were in a way the first sort of open source type community feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And we say that it's like open source applied to community. That was kind of and to events. So this is actually how we marketed Mobile Monday and how we explained how it works. That it was very kind of loosely defined on what a Mobile Monday event and how it works. That just make it happen. One thing that is important to remember, that nowadays it would be very easy to organize many of these because of Facebook and various event services and all that, but this happened before we had all of these fantastic tools for bringing people together. So it was quite an achievement to actually make it so. And this is something that people don't realize, that from my perspective nowadays it's super easy because you have all the tools, you can reach all the people. But back then, we had email and mobile phones, so it wasn't social networking wasn't a thing.
True. It's funny actually. I made sure we had the beers here. Because, my wife sometimes thinks I go on about this too much, but when I was writing that article, which kind of inspired this podcast series about Slush and Snap Stories, hearing the Alto ES people talk about how they kind of created these social events with beer and pizza and everything. And now I realize actually Mobile Monday was sort of set the scene for that kind of thing. And I think it's important because if these events are too dry and formal, they don't create the connections and the sparks between people.
Totally, but I think that it's also it's not Mobile Monday invented that. I think that also looking at good HP and Silicon Valley traditions, that it used to be that there's always a beer bust on Fridays at HP. Earlier. So it's one of these things, and I think that it's again it's about life. That it's not just work. It's the social connections, the friendships, all of that. That I think that it's super important that you look at it very holistically, and I think that with Mobile Monday that was also the idea that beer, pizza, done, very simple. You don't need to clearly define that this is how it works. If you leave a lot of room for people to improve it, and when you do, they will do that. And I think this is always been kind of my approach to things, that I don't need to do everything myself. I mean, it's again important to let other people make things better, and I think this is something that is very important. That it's kind of like a little bit that the less defined, the better, because then people can make it their own. And I think what with Mobile Monday, we wanted people to like own it and make it their own thing. So, you know, like Mobile Monday in Tel Aviv, very different from Mobile Monday in, I don't know, Seattle or something like that. So, or Mobile Monday Moscow, you know, and we had that as well. So, and actually Mobile Monday Tallinn, which, you know, like was also just talked to the guys, and that was I didn't even remember, you know, but yeah, so it's like super interesting and again super simple, so not like over-engineered or anything like that.
I think this is a perfect segue into the fact that when we ZippyPop, that's my first startup, we had the kind of Friday beers.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was necessarily through Friday beers, but through hanging out at ZippyPop,
yes,
should we say.
Totally,
might have been with Friday beers, but you met like Kai, Nementu, and Julian.
Sure.
So it'd be quite nice space to for you to talk initially about how you'd been thinking, why there was a need for a kind of slush event, and then how that coincided with Kai's thinking, and then your famous lunch or
lunch, MySoCalledStartup, absolutely. So I mean, kind of like again, like my background doing the HP Bazaar and Mobile Monday, we started then. So and that was pretty early. I mean, 1999, 2000, and then like taking from there. And also actually, I mean, maybe one thing there before we jump into the slush thing, but also that I had then met. I mean, for example, Ilkka from Supercell. Actually, I met him first time when he was doing Sumea with a few of his friends, and they were doing the first like puzzle games for the first like Java phones from Siemens with the black and white screens and like all of that. So I think it's a good reminder that a lot of these things have been around, and a lot of these people have been around for a while. So it's not like they started yesterday and massive success. So it takes some time. But one thing that also in 2003 organized this game making competition to make the best possible mobile multiplayer game. And then Niklas, Kim and Jarno, so they're studying at what is now Aalto, but I mean basically a technical university. Helsinki University of Technology, I guess was the official name or something like that. And then they took part in the competition, won the competition by creating this King of the Cabbage World game. And then after that, they came to me and like, okay, what do we do now? And then I said that, I mean, you guys obviously love playing games, love making games. So why don't you do what you love? Why don't you start a company to make games? So they started Relude, which actually then a little bit later became Rovio in 2003, and then over the following 6 years they made 51 games. 52nd game, Angry Birds, came out 11th of December 2009. So again, you know, like example that a lot of these things kind of like started pretty early, and it's about like bringing the right people together. So the Rovio guys Niklas and these guys, they took part in like our bazaar camps at the time and these like competitions, and same thing with like Ilkka and the Sumea guys. So they were part of our like bazaar events. They met Trip Hawkins, then Digital Chocolate happened. So there's like a lot of interesting kind of like touch points.
I think that's the core of where my interest in the HP Bazaar, how it was feeding the community in that kind of way.
Yeah, and many of the people like kind of like met there, and we were doing I would say like pretty amazing things in the end. That it was a lot of stuff that hadn't been done before. So it was pretty interesting. But yeah, so then I mean also with Slush, I mean my background in with Bazaar, Mobile Monday, doing these kind of like communities, and then also having been to many events, and I always refer to these as these kind of like wannabe Silicon Valley events, and that's like one thing that annoys me like to no end, that there's you go somewhere and then they will tell you that they want to be the Silicon Valley of this, Silicon Valley of that. I mean, you go to Beijing, they want to be the Silicon Valley of China. Tokyo, we want to be Silicon Valley of Asia. Everybody wants to be Silicon Valley, but I mean Silicon Valley is already there. So like, why do you want to be something like old? And then another thing, in 2007, I gave a talk to the 600 students at Aalto University and about entrepreneurship. And this is actually, if we think about it, it's 2007, so it's not like forever, but it's a while ago. And actually my topic, I had like the title slide was it's okay to be an entrepreneur. And it's a little bit like in Finnish you would say that ihan jees olla yrittäjä. So basically that it's okay, Finnish modesty, that even, like if it's fantastic and if you had a fantastic day and I ask, a Finnish person, how was your day, that he or she will probably say, it was okay, even though it was fantastic. So, I mean, of course, my topic was it's okay to be an entrepreneur, translated from Finnish, it's fantastic. But anyway, but I remember that very well because I was then like going through like a few examples and like was talking about like some stuff from like TechCrunch and, like what have you. And then during my presentation, I asked like, okay, that like how many of you guys have, thought about like starting your own company or joining a startup once you graduate or even before, which is like fine. And out of the 600 students in 2007, only 3 raised their hands. And I think 2 of them were like foreign students. So we're like, from a Finnish perspective, like disaster. And then kind of like that have to do something about this. And this kind of like was leading up to Slush. But I still remember that, Jori Lallo, he was one of the 600 students. And Jori then after my presentation came up to me and it's interesting because now it sounds like really, but he told me the first time he heard the word entrepreneur, so he was finishing his studies at Aalto, first time he heard about TechCrunch. So during my presentation he went to the TechCrunch like blog and like was reading about that and he's like, this is very interesting. And then so he got actually very intrigued and he got excited about like startups and entrepreneurship. But this is, like now that wouldn't happen. Or I think that it would be very difficult to find 600 students at Aalto who haven't heard about startups or entrepreneurship or say TechCrunch or whatever. Then Jori went on to become like one of the first volunteers at the first Slush. And then he went on to be one of the founders of Aalto ES. And he was also together with Karri. They started Kipt, and that was the first startup from Finland to go to Y Combinator, so that was like a big deal. Remember at Slush 2012 they were on stage, introduced as these are our hometown heroes. They were the first to go to Y Combinator. I mean, Karri was then co-founder of Arctic Startup, actually wearing the Arctic 15 hoodie. Then he also was the co-founder of Rails Girls with Linda Liukas. Actually it's fun to do these things because
connect
it's
the dots back.
Yeah, it's like everything connected and like this not so small crew, actually lots of people all over the community making bits and pieces happen here and there. So it's interesting.
Yeah, so after I remember that you did a TKK talk and then Aalto University, and then it wasn't that long after that you met up with Kai.
Yeah. So Kai basically, I'm just trying to think. I think Kai must have been working on Floobs already then. I think that's the video startup. And then
he had the developer gatherings.
He had the developer gatherings, and then we had actually launched, and we were talking about that he wanted to do like a bigger version of the developer gathering, and then I think that where probably then that could I help with like some of the contacts at like Nokia and other companies, and then I said that okay, fine, that I'm more than happy to help, but let's make it bigger. And also that I don't want to just, like developer gathering, but let's do an event and we will call it Slush. And because I had been thinking about this Slush concept that again, coming from this, that everybody else doing this wannabe Silicon Valley event, so let's make Slush. And of course then from the beginning with Slush, it's the whole idea that unlike all the others, they organize their events in the summer and they hope that it's going to be nice and sunny and, like almost like the Silicon Valley. So then we wanted to do November. So it's like November in Helsinki. Cold, dark, slush on the ground. So it's not the Silicon Valley. It's much, much better. And it's much, much better because it's different. And I think that this is something that, it's still, of course, true to this day. That, if you come to Finland, if you come to Helsinki in November, that's the way it is. So nobody will confuse it for Silicon Valley easily, unless you're like inside. But the thing is, that was kind of like the whole idea. And then, first slush we organized at Korjaamo in 2008. 300 people showed up, and we had Ilkka Paananen was talking, Risto Siilasmaa, we had Sampo Karjalainen, we had Monty Videnius, we had Ilja Laurs, and Matt Marshall from VentureBeat moderating and all of that. But I think what was very, and there's a lot of like good stories that came out of the first slush. But Ilja started GetJar in Vilnius, and I wanted to have Ilja there to share his startup story, because you know how it is, and I think even now that you have to understand that it's so difficult to raise funding in Finland, and you could replace Finland by Indonesia, Sweden, Germany, whatever. It's always difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult. But back in the day, actually I invited Ilja because Ilja again. There was like the Mobile Monday connection that Rich Wang actually discovered GetJar. So Rich Wang from Accel, he discovered GetJar because he had invested in AdMob. And AdMob was one of these early mobile advertising companies. And then they were looking at, there's this like crazy company called GetJar that is spending so much money on advertising on AdMob. That like, who are these guys? And then Rich, found out, GetJar sounds interesting. And then they checked it out. So it was like the App Store before the App Stores kind of thing. And then Rich, got on the phone, let's call GetJar. And he called the GetJar office in Vilnius. And then one of the guys answered and basically said that, okay, yeah, it's GetJar, and, how can we help you? And then Rich said that, it's Rich Wang from Accel, I would like to talk to your CEO. So then the guys gave the phone to Ilja, and then Rich said that, it's Rich Wang from Accel. And then Ilja was okay, so do you have a problem with your phone, or like how can I help you? Because that was normal that you downloaded these jar files, for your phone. So then Rich Wang said, no, it's Rich Wang from Accel, the venture capital company. And then Ilja, very smart guy, is like, that's like, how can I help you? And then Rich said that I would like to invest in your company. And then Ilja said that actually we are doing very well, we are very profitable, we don't need any money. but then Ilja, being a very smart guy, and he studied during like the Soviet times and all of that, so like lots of fun stories. I think he studied economics or something. But anyway, so he decided that, venture capital, what is this? That, and then he studied, and then he realized that, so this is how it works. So they invest, like venture capital, they invest to help you grow. Mm-hmm. So then he reconnected with Rich and said that, let's talk more, that, this would be, very interesting. And then actually what then ended up happening is that I think Accel invested, was it 8 or 10 million into GetJar in Vilnius, Lithuania. And then that's the story that I wanted, Ilja to share with the community in Finland, that, hey, here you have this guy from, and you have to remember that this was like almost, like more than 10 years ago. So Lithuania and Vilnius was a bit different back then. That, here you have this guy, that is kind of like, from Finnish perspective, middle of nowhere, and Accel finds them, invests in them. So, stop complaining about like fundraising being difficult, that if you have a great idea, money will find you. You will find the money. And then another thing with this Ilja, appearance at the first slush, we then asked the panelists that, okay, so what do you want to have, like to drink? And then Ilya said, like a vodka. And then, like he was very surprised that we actually delivered a vodka to his panel discussion. And then he always shares this story that Slush is the only event that he's ever been to where he actually had to or got to drink vodka on the panel.
I think that's in a way. I think this, as you said to me in the past, like you really got to keep an open mind when you're trying to create these kind of communities and look for every little story that can get attention.
And then Ilya has been running around the world sharing this with everybody that, hey, you went to Slush, guess what? Vodka. And, so then, like you have to do these kind of things that, he's been to many events, but he only talks about Slush because of the vodka. So, whatever it takes to stand out, to differentiate, get the message there, that's what you do.
I think you're the genius of doing a very on the spot in life without having to think about it too much. So we all kind of, you had a great start, and then there was some challenges with just such a small team keeping Slush going with Timo, and then I would say that I don't know if they're like of course there are always challenges, but I don't like see it kind of like that way. I think that people are always like, when you do events, are always concerned about like not this being perfect, that being perfect, and all of that. But first year we did Korjaamo, then we did a big jump moving to Cable Factory. Of course, that's a huge space. So like the second year we had like 1,000, 1,500, something like that. I think 1,200. And then so every year like kind of like a massive, if you look at like just percentage-wise, massive growth. And we had actually some very good speakers. Rich Wang from Excel was there. We had Aydin Senkut, actually one of the super angels from Silicon Valley. So we got like a lot of cool investors involved, like from the get-go pretty much. And I think that was again knowing a few people. But then what happened was that Angry Birds happened, and then I got totally tied up with that. And then we actually had from the beginning tried to get the Aalto ES guys to help out, and hey, why don't we but then they only got on board after Miki took over Aalto ES, and then we got Aalto ES involved. Aalto ES was started like 1 year after Slush, just like Boost and Stream in Tampere and like a lot of the ESs around Finland. So that was kind of like the time, and maybe still the time of these ESs and so these entrepreneurship societies. So then handed over kind of like Slush and the Slush brand to kind of like the Slush team. So then Miki was running that for the next few years, and I think at that time when Miki took over and it grew very rapidly, the press started writing about Miki as being the founder.
Yeah,
and I think in some ways I was thinking it should be more the refounder in a way, because
but it's not
you
like
got the legs going and then it was ready.
But it's not really like the way it happened, because I was helping Miki and the team with like all the contacts of the speakers and like all of that. So I've been like active in the Slush community since the beginning. So it's not like a complete like handover. I wasn't like doing that like day to day, but I don't think that again from the beginning, from the first Slush, the vision was to make Slush the biggest and best startup event on the planet, and so I don't think that there's like any big change in like direction or anything like that.
I think the main difference then was just one of the big things when you did the very first Slush was you couldn't get any press to turn up at all. And then by the time Miki came, the press was really interested by that point. So they suddenly had a lot more exposure.
I would still say that we had a press first thing that we did actually with the team when we started the first Slush. We went to Helsinki and Sanomat and we told them what we were up to. And then we had Matt Marshall. You can find the articles on VentureBeat for the first Slush. So it was not, and actually one thing that you have to keep in mind with Slush, that we didn't create Slush to be an event. We created Slush to change the mindset. So from the beginning it was about getting media and getting media attention. So we worked on that like every single year, and of course it takes some time before you get the traction. But it's again that's how it goes. So from my perspective, it's just been kind of going according to plan since like day one.
I think so. And then you were very influential in. You took a delegation to Japan and I think used your old networks to kick it off in Asia. And
we did like, or actually we did that with Antti Soninen, who hired to run Rovio Japan. And then we did actually a startup sauna event before we started Slush. And then Taiso-san came here for Slush, so they were the investor in Supercell, if you remember, like SoftBank back then. And Taiso wanted to do Slush in Japan, and then Antti and Taiso basically made that happen. And basically we made Slush big in Japan. so.
And I think with one of your genius when it comes to the branding and naming is that if you think about both Slush and Startup Sauna, so for Slush, that kind of November gritty snow thing actually fits with the whole kind of startup thing mentality,
yeah.
And then Startup Sauna kind of getting hot and sweaty. And I really like how you've.
And if you can't stand the heat, get out of the sauna. I mean, Startup Sauna is like great example. I mean, Christo and the guys, I mean, originally they called it the Aalto Venture Garage, and then we had a meeting at Johto Cafe, the classic that was in Kamppi on the 5th floor or something. Anyway, and then I was just like asking the guys that, hey, you have this Aalto Venture Garage. And I mean, I started my career at the original startup that Bill and Dave started in their garage in Palo Alto in 1939, so I know all the garage stories, but I was just saying that, okay, what will happen now when TechCrunch or Financial Times or Business Week or like some media flies to Helsinki, and you will start explaining to them that, oh, we have this student-run accelerator called the Aalto Venture Garage. And I said that like nothing will happen, because I mean, everybody has heard like too many garage stories, so why don't you call it Startup Sauna? And actually that's what happened. And now what happens when you then first hear about Startup Sauna, it's like, okay, that you have this student-run accelerator called Startup Sauna. Are you pitching naked in there, or like what? Can we see it? And then everybody wrote about Startup Sauna, and it's like the same activity and same things taking place, but it's about the brand, so that you create the the question, your reaction that, hey, what is this? What are you guys doing? And I think that this is something that is very important. And talking about saunas, we also took a sauna to the Le Web in 2008, I think it was.
I remember that. I think that's a really perfect place to wrap up, because we all have to move on. I just like to finish. So there's quite a high probability that we'll be doing, when I was working with Startup Sauna, taking them to East Africa and attending some of the events that they had, I realized there was a huge amount of talent inside the community amongst the entrepreneurs and investors, musical talent, singing talent, and a lot of wannabe pop stars in a way. So at the time I was struggling to get funding, as you know, for these trips to Africa. So I thought, what if we could use this kind of hidden wannabe pop star kind of thing and give them an excuse to be able to perform live and raise money for these activities. Cool. So what we're doing, the event will, fingers crossed, be called the Entrepreneurs Got Talent. Okay. So at the end of these podcast videos, we're just going to ask everybody, regardless whether they get in or not, to show us some kind of talent that people that might not know that they're famous for or not famous. But anyway, so I'm going to challenge you to do something that's a little bit unusual that people might not realize that you do.
And then I always have to say that I don't sing, so I have to, let's say, disappoint you or like not that. But I think that I mean, also we discussed this for us. Like, I don't have any like special talent there, but I mean, of course, we all have like some talent, and one maybe few people know, but I took the time after I left like Rovio and Angry Birds to learn Chinese, or at least try. So I spent 8 weeks in Beijing. So I can say things like Wajia Wei Bi De, Watsai, Beijing, Beijur Da, Xue Sile Baga Chin Chi, De Han Yu, Dan Sure, What Han Yu Hai Buan Mei. So I spent 8 weeks at Beijur Da, Beijing Normal University, studying Chinese, and That's why my Chinese is not yet perfect.
I think after 8 weeks, that's pretty impressive. So
it's getting there, but yeah.
So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this episode. We'd like to thank Epicenter for hosting us, and we look forward to seeing you guys again for another episode. Cheers.